Information is wonderful. We need it. Hopefully it inspires us, but without the integration, there is no transformation.
Welcome to The Shift, where we search for ways to do better by thinking better.
Whether you're going through a major life change, looking to deepen your understanding of yourself, or hoping to improve your relationships with others, The Shift is here for you.
We're your hosts, Isla and Yashar, an endlessly curious sister and brother team.
As certified brain-based executive coaches with backgrounds in medicine and management, we combine the neurosciences, performance psychology, strategic planning methodology, and mindfulness techniques to empower your transformation from the inside out.
Join us in conversation as we explore better ways to show up for ourselves and each other.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Shift. Today, I'm going to start off by calling BS on a statement that I hear over and over again, and I simply disagree. And that statement is, the more we know, the better we do. I just don't think that's true. I think there are so many more steps, and I think knowing is not enough. What do you think about that, Isla?
Knowing is not enough. Yeah, I believe that to be true. You're right. I believe that knowing is not our problem.
Yes, we have a saying, and it's kind of self-serving, right? Because this is our saying, and we're doing this episode. But we have a saying that we're drowning in knowledge, yet starving for wisdom. And so do you want to explain that saying, or do you want me to?
Well, I can give you my interpretation of it, and then you can give yours.
Let's do it.
Okay. So for me, when I hear drowning in knowledge, yet starving for wisdom, what that means to me is that we have all of this information available to us. You can take the word knowledge and switch it for information. So we are drowning in information. You know, we have access to infinite amount of stuff, all things Googleable. So that is not our problem or issue or pain point. The pain point arises in which, what do we do with that information? And I think that's what the difference is between knowing something because we know of something and integrating it in a way that it is applicable to us, it serves us, it aligns with our values. And that's where wisdom comes from. So the wisdom comes from the integration of this information into our lives in a way that best aligns with our values, our hopes, our dreams, and what kind of impact we want to make. So when I hear that statement, drowning in knowledge, yet starving for wisdom, the biggest thing that kind of highlights to me is that we are lacking the self-awareness, the personal accountability to turn all this information available to us into something that truly works and serves our life. And the missing component there is also, intuition. I think wisdom and intuition play a role where you have an infinite amount of information, but which part of this information is truly for you? And that answer usually comes from a strong sense of intuition that comes from yourself to know how to integrate this into your life.
Yeah, there's many points to that. And I think that's where the confusion can lie, because a lot of people want answers. A lot of people, as we always say, are looking for a guru and are outsourcing the answers to their questions. And I think in a lot of moments in life, that can be useful if another step is added in addition to learning some information. But just simply the fact or the statement that the more we know, the better we do, I think is something that actually is not only false, but dangerous, because people end up, and we all know these people who end up accumulating so much knowledge that they know it all, yet nothing's really changing or nothing is really shifting in their life in the direction that they were hoping to, whether that be in fitness, in relationship, in finance, and even, as you said, intuition, learning how to work with your intuition, learning how to listen more carefully and closely to the feelings and the thoughts that come up within you.
Can I throw the question back at you then? What is the missing link when you say that, that statement is not enough? What is your interpretation of our saying, drowning in knowledge yet starving for wisdom?
Yeah, I think everything you said is accurate. I think wisdom is the application of that information in a personally meaningful and purposeful way. However, I think it requires action. And I think that's where people fall short. And if I look in the mirror again, like I've said on pretty much every episode here, I can fall short on these topics too, because I, like whoever's listening, am human. And so we fall short in these areas. And that's why these conversations are so necessary. But the action piece is where integration comes from. You have to be able to take that information and do something with it, apply it to yourself in a way that you're building a relationship with whatever that information is. And if you're not willing to do that, which there are reasons why you might not want to, because it's scary, it's hard, it's different, it's challenging your status quo. So I understand why one wouldn't want to take action on it. But without that piece of doing and trying and repeating and becoming, a studier of yourself, then there's no way you can gain any sort of wisdom. There's no way you can gain any sort of intuition. You have to be able to go through the experiences, trying on different things. It's like going into a fitting room and trying on different clothes. That's why the fitting rooms exist. If you knew how it would look on you, feel on you, from the get-go, you just take it off the shelf, you buy it and you go home. But the fitting rooms are there for you to actually feel it out, look at yourself, walk around, see how this fits for you. And that's a really simple example of like what we need, I think, in our lives. So when I get information, let's say, on how to be a better parent, you're not going to be that version of you the next day. Maybe things are going really, really well, and it's easy to step into that. But just because you learn something about better parenting doesn't make you automatically a better parent. And I think I heard something the other day. I was actually having a conversation with a friend, and we were talking about the idea of, what is it to be like a grown up? What is it to be mature? And he said, I think I know I've made it when I cannot get as emotional or as angry as the person across from me. And we were talking about this out-regulating the other person. If we can do our best to not go down the slippery slope of getting more emotional because the other person's emotional, adding to the emotion, and back and forth we go into this fire. But if we can out-regulate just to hear their points and not to become the version of ourselves that we're not happy about. So that is a really exciting idea. I think most people who want good relationships would like to out-regulate, say their children, their partners, the business people they work with, so that they can reach some sort of conclusion that's loving and supportive and beneficial for all members. However, knowing that, even knowing how to regulate yourself, doesn't mean you're actually going to be able to do it. Another example is reading a book on how to swim, but never going into water. You have the knowledge, but you don't have the experience. You'll never know how to do it. And so that's why I have such a strong reaction to a saying like that, because I think most people then feel like they're incapable because they're so smart and they've taken on so much information, but they haven't yet applied it in a purposeful, meaningful, and personal way to gain the wisdom. And as you said, to also gain the intuition that comes with that practice.
So this quote that you are, calling BS on, which is when you know better, you do better. We have a similar, tagline that we use, that's doing better by thinking better. So I'm sitting here thinking, what is it that you believe we do differently that makes our statement true? Doing better by thinking better. Or, when we're talking about leadership, we say doing better by leading better. What is it within our methodology, within the way that we present information and we train and we coach and we teach, that you think is the secret sauce that makes the difference?
So if we look at the words used, to know, to think, and to lead. To know is like a vessel that's holding water.
Okay.
And the more you add water to it, the more you know. But it's holding information. To think better is a verb. It's an action. Mm-hmm. You're learning how to decipher. You're learning how to look through. You're learning how to laterally and critically think through problems, challenges, self-awareness, awareness of others. And to lead better is just the ultimate behavior of the accumulation of leading yourself, understanding yourself, communicating well, knowing how to have conflict resolution skills, knowing how to see other people's pain points, knowing how to step outside of what's happening and look at the bigger picture. That's the ultimate expression of thinking, being, and acting. And so knowing by itself, again, is lonely. It's just it's a vessel. Like the potential is there, but nothing is being done with that potential, right? I have a full glass of cold, ice cold water sitting on the counter, and I'm sweaty and hot and parched. The potential is there, but I need to lift my hand, grab that glass, put it to my mouth, and drink it. There's an actual behavior that needs to be engaged with to benefit from that full glass of water or knowledge. And thinking is a behavior. Leading is a behavior. They're action-oriented words versus just the capacity or the potential of. And so directly in the way we train, the way we coach, and the way we do life generally is we understand that there's a plethora of information, as you already stated, Ida. Hopefully, if the right information hits you at the right time, there's a sense of inspiration. And that's great. That's when you're like, okay, passionate. This is cool. I set out my workout clothes. I set my meal plans in place. I tell myself I'm not going to yell at my kid. I tell myself I'm going to step into the office, smile, and say hello to that person that I've had a hard day with the day before. Like you get this inspiration to be that
It's
way.
like the feeling you have like when you're at a conference and you're, have a slew of inspirational speakers, a great keynote, and you have that. That's it. I can do this. Like I have the motivation to create this change.
Exactly. And then most of us who have had any sort of professional work life know that feeling, or educational work life, know that feeling. And then a day, 2, a week, 3 weeks go by and you're just kind of not inspired the same way. If anything, now you're beating yourself up because you remembered being inspired. And you're like, oh, I had this information and I was this and I was that. And now I'm not doing these things anymore.
Because
So
now you know better. Going back to your first thing, it's like, better, but you actually aren't doing better.
Yeah, you're thirsty as heck and you see that glass of water, but you just can't move your arm to go get it. And so that's really a frustrating place to be. So the question becomes, what is next? And this is where the bread and butter of all learning and the bread and butter of all the training and coaching that we do is, after information comes inspiration. There must be huge attention placed on integration. You have to take this information and the emotional excitement and do, act, be. If you don't integrate, there's nothing left. It will just become another book on the shelf. It'll be another podcast you listen to, maybe even this one. It'll be another thing you did, and it's just telling you you're further away from your goal. And only after that integration comes, the promised land of transformation, the change that we want, the relationship that we want with ourselves, with other people, the financial changes that we're looking for in our lives, the health goals that we want, the version of ourselves that we put in all this work to gain all this information to actually actualize. And so that's the difference. We need to put action into place. And I would love to hear someone, who thinks differently comment on this podcast. But that's really where I've kind of put my flag in the sand here and claiming the stake.
It's true. And it's just not as sexy as the inspiration part. That's just the truth. And so when most people are working with us and we emphasize that the part we're doing together is this integration part, you're inspired and you're excited, and that will come. And the transformation is definitely our goal. But to take us from inspiration to transformation, we're going to spend all our time in integration, because we also know that's where the heavy lifting is. That's usually where the hardest parts are. And this is where we're hoping to spot you and help facilitate, your thoughts and your actions to optimize this experience, because we know it's the hardest part. And so it's also sometimes the hardest sell. If you think of it, we always use exercise as our metaphor because it's such an easy place to show this work, but it's kind of like, again, you see this kind of healthy lifestyle. You are excited about this idea of feeling better in your body and your movement, being more agile, etc. you get a trainer, you're not expecting the trainer to do the work for you, right? And this is kind of the same scenario. Like that transformation only occurs if you are the one in the plank position, not your trainer. And so again, we're there to spot you and, help you take on more weights, more load, think differently, try it differently, notice the places that maybe you need a little bit more support. But ultimately, that's where the magic is going to happen, is you kind of doing the reps, the repetition, reframing, changing your narratives, working on these mindset muscles to align better actions so that that transformation that you so desperately want, that you've set out to get to, we don't set the transformation goal. It's yours. You say what you want and we help you get there. We just hope that, through this process, it becomes more attainable and really that we optimize the process for you to realize it.
So I think it's important to take this information and actually let's integrate the information that we're learning here. So let's go through the steps.
Okay.
With a real example.
Okay. So what is something in your life that you do that you don't like, that you would like to change? Give me an example.
I think I just volunteered myself to be coached on this podcast. One thing I don't like, I don't like when I catch myself procrastinating.
Okay. So this is a behavior that you do that you don't have a great relationship with, that you would like to shift in some way. Correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So why is it, activating you in a way that doesn't feel aligned?
Because usually I'm procrastinating on something that I know, see, there's a word, I know I can do. I just at that moment don't feel like doing it, but I know I can complete the task.
And how often do you find yourself engaging in this behavior?
I'm trying to keep one task in mind, so that it's, I'm not with this one task I have in mind. It's usually 2-3 times a week. I have to really rev my engines to complete this task.
And how often would you like to, reduce this behavior? Because I'm assuming your goal right now is to reduce it, right? So what would be your end goal in how you, deal with this behavior that you're not feeling aligns with you? I
would like to reduce it down to it might be a few minutes, 5 minutes of dragging my heels a little bit, but nothing more than 5 minutes. I'm okay feeling the feelings. I think that's actually important to be okay, you're there again, acknowledge it. Okay. But then 5 minutes into that, here we are, kind of can't pick my butt off the couch kind of thing. It's no, off we go. I'd like to get to that place where it's no more than 5 minutes. Okay.
And currently it's how long?
It's probably not much more, but let's say it's 10 to 15. But it's 10 to 15 minutes
avoiding it completely.
Yeah, it's 10 to 15 minutes of this is again, I know better. It's that feeling, I know better, and I could just get up and go.
Okay, what would change in your life in this week if that was reduced down to 5 minutes to 0 minutes? What would change for you?
Oh, I would feel highly accomplished. And that feeling of being accomplished, that feeling of doing the thing is very, very attractive.
And where do you feel it in your body when you are in that state of accomplishing these tasks that you are, sometimes procrastinating on?
I think it's not a specific place, but it's definitely a body rush, it's an excitement. And it's also an accomplishment. There's a body rush of it's getting done. This is exciting. Okay. Yeah. And then when it's done, it's there's a groundedness to it. There's all right, that's complete. And I actually described it to my wife the other day as I'm picturing these episodes of getting these things done as pockets or packets, I should say, packets of love that I'm just leaving as trails. throughout my day. So I try to see it more visually stimulating and exciting and aligned with the version of me that I want to be.
Okay. So I'm going to stop for a second here to kind of illustrate what I'm asking and why I'm doing it, and also kind of paint this picture a little bit. So, I could go deeper and deeper into this, but what I'm trying to find out is, one, what is this identified problem? What is the identified solution? And when we're looking at the solution, what changes in your life, in your physical health, in your mental health, in your emotional and spiritual health? What shifts? So when we're looking to shift, there is like an end goal of like, this is your reward. This is the treat, this feeling, this excitement you said, this feeling of groundedness, these pockets of love you're dispersing into the world, whatever that is for you. Like, we know why it is that it feels good. We also know what the problem is, and we also know changing it would help. So the question is, then why don't you do it? And I think this goes back to your original problem that you presented on today's podcast, which when we know better, we do better. And we're seeing like, no, you know better, you know how it's even going to feel, but you still don't do better. So that's when we're coming in with this middle part of the integration of how then to create this change. So now we can explore it, but I just wanted to take a moment to kind of put this all out there to show like, these are what we've identified. This is usually where people are in most of the journey, at least with working with us, is they usually have this information already. They know it. We might, bring out more, nuanced things. Maybe they didn't think of the embodiment questions that I asked, and maybe they didn't know the ways in which it'll affect their life. And so I bring that out more, but the question still remains, how do I get from point A to point B?
Correct. So
Okay.
What's next, coach?
So let's go back to this idea of procrastination. Okay. So I want you to sit in, this example you have in your mind, and I want you to describe to me the feelings that are happening in the moment where you are procrastinating. What are the thoughts you're having? What are the actions that are happening? What's going on?
Two things. One that I've identified only most recently is, once I get started with work, I don't like to be interrupted.
Okay.
And so I think sometimes I have to find the perfect time where there's, family is not interrupting, people aren't coming or going. I have, time. I have time to do the work I want to do. I like once I'm in the flow of work, I'm fine being there. So sometimes I find that the procrastination comes because I'm like, oh, do I have enough time? Will I get into that feeling of it? And so that's one part of it. And the other part of it is simply, I think sometimes I'm just feeling lazy, tired, not wanting to do the work because I'm just tired.
Okay. So which one do you want to tackle first?
I think it's the lazy and tired one, because that's been really interesting for me to explore, because doing some coaching, self-coaching around this, I've understood how to integrate this knowing a little bit more. So maybe that'd be more fruitful.
Okay. So let's talk about this concept of laziness, because it is like a construct in some ways too, of, usually informed by society and how we're meant to kind of hustle and bustle all the time. So there is a shaming and blaming that goes on, that the first thing I want to do is remove that, right? Let's remove that, because we always know when there's shaming and blaming involved, our whole ecosystem shuts down. It blocks us. It does not optimize productivity. So finding ways in which we can kind of give ourselves grace, remove that, and have a different type of conversation around the fact whether we want to do an action or not. Because rest is actually a critical ingredient to productivity. So the reframe starts with understanding the purpose of rest, and if it's not integrated within our system, it will look like laziness, but really what it is a rest and recovery moment. So let's start with that. Let's think of an example that you are now thinking of and ask yourself, is this a space in which you need rest and recovery? Yes or no?
As you were saying all that, the answer is actually no.
Okay.
It's not a rest and recovery. It actually is more to do with a judgment of the quality of work that would get done once I get started. And so
Perfect.
that's where I have a hard time starting sometimes, because I'm like, is the quality of work going to meet the standard in which I want it to meet if I'm going to dedicate my time doing this?
So let's stop there for a second. See how just this one critical element allowed us to kind of take the first layer of noise out and discover another layer of where this pain point is coming from. This is usually what happens when there's these big statements of I'm procrastinating, I'm lazy, I'm this and that. If we kind of remove all this judgment and kind of keep sweeping these layers away, we get closer and closer to what is actually going on. And so right now we've gotten to this thing about the work, the value, the self-worth, the quality. This idea, is it good enough? So that root is very different from a root of quote unquote lazy, or even the concept of procrastination, because we're now uncovering a whole new type of pain point. And so, this can go on forever, and we're not going to do that on this whole podcast, but I want to say this is what we do in coaching, is where we uncover the real pain point that's going on as we unmask it from all this external noise. And once we get to identify this pain point, that's where the integration and changes are able to occur, because now we're understanding why the knowing and the doing have a huge block in the middle. And you're just seeing it as like, I know I should do better. I'm just procrastinating. I'm not getting it done. If we just did that over and over in our brains, what we're doing is shutting down our whole system. And again, shaming ourselves that like, better. Why aren't you doing it? Versus now we've like uncovered this gem, which is like how you feel about the work and the product, and feeling like, is this good enough? And that's a whole different conversation. That's a whole different examination of what you need to feel confident within yourself and what muscles we're going to build there, to also you being okay with putting things out into the world that maybe don't look and feel a certain way, because we're also getting better at what, this again, another construct of perfectionism and what that even looks like. And so again, we would have never been able to unlayer these pieces and look at them and discuss them if we just took the blanket statement that I procrastinate. That really limits us in seeing what's really going on here. And for you specifically, then now we can actually tackle your real pain point. And that's where we're, optimizing your growth, which being able to look at this in a new light, tackle it, and give yourself new tools in how you think about it and how you deal with it when you show up for the day to work.
Yeah, I think so. And that's where I've had the best breakthrough is not, setting out my computer, setting a timer, doing some of the traditional procrastination work. It's actually been grounding myself and recognizing that, like, by me showing up to this work and giving it what I have, I will ultimately be more proud of myself, and than if I just avoid it. And so that's a critical point to be made. And I think what was interesting about the coaching, even though a lot of it has been determined, by me as I've self-coached, just even hearing you feed it back to me, it really does highlight, like, if we don't take the time to understand why this is happening and don't take the time to integrate the information so that you can then take practice in this form, then it's really easy to get lost in just a heavy and probably incorrect description of what's happening. And that's when we start to, chase our tail a little bit and not see much progress being made. So I think what's most powerful then is to recognize that even in this little coaching, you weren't giving me the answers. You weren't giving me more knowledge. You were giving me an opportunity and a space to integrate that knowledge by asking myself deeper questions. And that in itself is the behavior. That's the thinking we were referring to earlier. So you were helping me do better by thinking better, by integrating the information that I've already had about what's been going on with me, and start to think about it and dissect it differently.
Exactly. I think, again, when we think about how to get from point A to point B, most of it has to do with uncovering what's holding us back. That takes a level of curiosity, but with deep compassion, because usually in this middle space, there is so much shame and blame. And like I said, this is what's deterring our growth. This is definitely not optimizing this experience. And so what we hope to do is if you get to get curious with yourself with deep compassion, offer yourself grace and rest whenever you need to, but really understand what is the real pain point holding you back, knowing you have this knowledge and knowing the change you want. What's your pain point and how can you offer it tools to bring you closer to your goals?
So we started by me calling BS on the statement, the more we know, the better we do. Thank you for the coaching. You gave an example of how simple yet effective this type of conversation can be when we understand that knowing alone is not enough. When we take the time to understand that information is wonderful, we need it. Hopefully it inspires us, but without the integration, there is no transformation. And the point that you and I make all the time, and even though, as we say, we're in the work, we do the work as well, is we have to understand that the answers to the questions often come from within us. And once there's information there and you're inspired by it, then it's time to ask yourself the question. It's time to look within yourself to have an answer come up and take action on some of that so that you will become more refined with your relationship with the things that you're learning about yourself. And therefore, that's what leads to the transformation.
Thank you for listening, friends. What shifted for you during this episode? We'd love to hear your insights. Write us with any questions, commentary, or episode ideas at theshift@mindshiftleadership.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, we would deeply appreciate a like and subscribe.
The Shift is brought to you by MindShift Leadership, a heart-centered, evidence-based, mindset-powered leadership company, empowering you with the training to prioritize mental health, inclusion, and performance optimization.